Did you record?
No, not yet. Just real quick, for anyone tuning in, I don't even remember, I guess episode 19, is that accurate? God, 19 episodes already. Jeez, we started in August, almost 20 episodes. So today we're going to be talking about racism and discrimination in a lot of, I'm going to focus more on the South Asian community because obviously my background is South Asian, but I'm going to talk a little bit about just Asian in general. And then we're going to get into the Falcon and Winter Soldier. We're at 2 episodes so far in the series. Got the 3rd one coming out this Saturday. So I'm going to start off with the introductions. Have myself, Omar, or I guess first names are right. I know we're doing names.
We see your first and last name on the thing.
Sure, I know. That's what I was saying, but you're like, no, all right. So we have this random fan today, Nicholas. He's our top fan.
Right, number one fan.
And actually, Sahid, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? And
I'll introduce myself. So it says, my name is Sahid, and I want to introduce a mentor of mine that I work with, and a fan of the show. Happy to have him on. Thank you for joining us, all your support, Mr. Jose. How's it going?
Doing pretty good. Other people call me Carlos. Some people call me Paco. You know.
See, I did not know any of this.
For some reason, people forget my name is Jose and will call me Carlos, which is my brother's middle name. But, since we're talking about racism and topics like that, we all look alike, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And on that note.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect segue. So, no, seriously, Jose, glad to have you here. You're our first guest on the show, so it's very special.
Ooh,
we know you've been watching several of our episodes, and seriously, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we would give you some merch, but we don't have any yet. So.
Not yet, but we've been talking about it very, very soon. So anyone watching this, we're going to come out with some really cool merch pretty soon. But actually, before we dive into our topics for the night, wanted to try something a little bit different that we do at the start of every episode. We're going to try our best. Start giving a shout out to some local minority-owned businesses. And so first one is my second home, and I'm making sure my wife is not watching this.
I'm away from home.
She is. Yeah, away from home. There you go. Great place. It's called Fusion Hookah Lounge. It's in Springfield, 6400 Commerce Street, Springfield, right across the street from Springfield Mall. They've just redesigned. They're doing another soft opening. The place looks amazing, and best hookah in the DMV for anyone into that. They have full food menu as well.
Definitely vouch for the spot. Enjoyed my time there. Definitely miss it with the pandemic and everything. So I can't wait to get back.
Yeah, you should have a theme song like something like the place to be when you're COVID free, something like that. You're welcome.
They do have a temperature check. They do require you to wear masks until you sit down, and they do take precautions on all the servers. They won't wear masks, so just in case anyone's wondering. And they do have some outdoor seating as well. Also, we have NV Solutions as well. Another local business, belongs to one of our very own, Nicholas. So Nicholas, you want to talk really quickly about that?
Yeah, NV Solutions is my my side hustle. So basically use that to do a lot of web development, application development. I did the logos for the podcast and for some other people as well. So I'm still getting my feet wet in different things, but mostly do web design for various websites and stuff. So definitely looking to keep things going.
Awesome. And another one is actually my own side gig too. So I've been doing this for about maybe 5 or so years. It's a martial arts school, self-defense as well. Jiu-jitsu, ninjutsu, karate, all different types of weapons, things I don't even know what their names are in English. but all sorts of things. We're located in Tyson's Corner, right in front of Tyson's Corner One Mall, off Leesburg Pike. If anyone's interested, need a website, reach out to Nicholas. You want to learn how to defend yourself, or if you're just, a Naruto fan. No, I'm just kidding. Reach out to, hit us up on the page, send us a message. But let's jump right into it. All right. So first topic, this is actually something I've been hesitant to talk about for a while, right? Like I just said, we're in episode 19. We've been doing this since August. I'm going to talk really briefly a little bit about my background. All right. So my family is originally from Pakistan. My dad's been here about 51 years now. And so I'm second generation, and I was born in New Jersey. All right. And I was in a completely Caucasian Jewish neighborhood. It was a really good community. And no one back then really knew what a Pakistan was, right? You would say that, and God knows where people would point on the globe. Like this was back in. I was born in. I guess I have to finish that sentence. I was born in the mid '80s. All right, and at that time it was. God. For the record, Nicholas is older than me. I'm just gonna put it out there.
Oh, baby.
So I was raised in Jersey. It was a good community, but I got bullied a lot. Why? Because it wasn't really necessarily, I guess, racist. Kids get bullied for standing out, right? The Japanese have a proverb, right? The tree that sticks out of the forest gets cut down first. And that's what it was. And I dealt with a lot. By the time I got to junior high school, I'd already had at least 10 concussions. And that's no exaggeration. That has changed my view, my perspective of, just life in general. And I, even after sixth grade is when I finally started learning to fight back and defend myself. And I've, a whole history of constant just scuffles, defending myself. And so that changed my perspective, because in my mind, I was, like most minorities that grow up or born and raised here, or even just raised here, not even if they're born here, is why are people picking on me? I see myself exactly like everyone else. So you are forced to accept this reality that you did not realize. So unlike the African-American community, the South Asian community, and probably other, minority communities in the US as well, aren't really known for having the talk. There is no the talk. So we have to experience it on our own without being mentally prepared for it. And, especially because, like I said, my father came here in 1970, it was 10 years in Miami. It was in Jersey, and that's where I was born. And I dealt with all sorts of discrimination and racism and stuff like that. But kind of fast forwarding now, one thing that, obviously since, the previous, administration, the presidential administration, started their campaign, what was it, like back in 2012 to 2014 or something like that. I'm forgetting. I think maybe it's 2014 or something. FBI, we're tracking the statistics showing that hate crimes toward minorities are dramatically rising. And, there has been a long-standing issue with the African-American community, which I believe is the largest or second largest by a close margin with the Hispanic community in the U.S., as far as the largest minority group in the U.S. I don't remember which one's bigger, but I think they're pretty close.
Hispanic is larger by one.
Oh, okay. So, obviously, things like, people like to, bring up things like, well, slavery's been abolished and racism doesn't exist only until you mention it. And you say things like that, but then you obviously have to look at the color of the people that are saying this. And I hate to say it that way, but that's the reality, right? Is you cannot comprehend something. This is basic stuff until you've walked a mile in someone else's shoes. And so with us, the Hispanic community historically being discriminated against in the U.S., and the African-American community being obviously discriminated against for centuries. One thing that bothers me a lot is that the South Asian community, we refer to ourselves as desis, as South Asians. There is a lot of discrimination within our own community against people of dark skin or Black people. And it's sad. So like I have, like my sister, for example, right? She's married to a phenomenal guy. I have never seen this guy upset, right? His family, they're African American. They're some of the most wonderful people I've ever met. Super humble, typical Southern family. And my sister used to be a talk show host for a Pakistani TV show. And this was primarily shown in Pakistan, but the response and a lot of the comments that she got were just really harsh, really discriminatory, like talking about my brother-in-law being Black. And my sister is very pale skinned, very light. And in South Asian communities, and actually in Asia in general, it's considered like there's a lot of words that are considered like negative, that carry a negative connotation, like, oh, you're so dark, and that's an insult. Like that is an insult. A lot of that also has to do with the British colonizing a lot of these countries in the past, and their concept of class and superiority comes from that. In a couple episodes, and we talked about Yasuke, right, the first African samurai. If for anyone here that's watching it, and you guys remember, I was talking about the Japanese were not racist against people of dark skin at the time, because the Buddha dolls were actually made in black paint, and so they looked at him as if he was like a deity, as if he was like a representation of Buddha, and so they loved him for that. But obviously, fast forward, well, even in the Far East, you're now talking, it's considered, a bad thing if you're considered dark. There's skin lightening creams, which are super popular in South Asia, throughout the Middle East as well. Really? Wow. And well, same thing. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, everything that's been, previous British colonies, anything that isn't colonized by the British, you see this mentality there. So my point in all of this is that we as minorities, right, the smaller minority groups, and especially in the US, and sure, but in Canada as well, because I'm seeing a lot more happening in Canada the last like decade or so, racism I'm referring to, is that we need to stick together. Now, I see it a lot that there are, other South Asians or even like East Asians, and, there's a lot of hate crimes right now happening toward the East Asian American community. You say Asians and people always think East Asian, right? You say Asian to me, I'm like South or East, right? So, there's a, like Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Thai, Vietnamese, they're all being discriminated against because of COVID. That's so stupid. And South Asian, when I was growing up, everyone called me Dot-head. Now every South Asian is considered a terrorist. I mean, it's, yeah.
I think part of that too comes from, the former president referring to the COVID-19 as the China virus, right?
Exactly.
Kung flu is what they call it, right? Yeah. Kung flu.
I mean, even worse, what I mean? But just as soon as he said that, and then, there's a lot of people who look up to him. He's, considered, was considered a leader at the time. So they follow what he says. And then you see, some of these things happening. I wanted to say two things real quick in reference, going back to what you were talking about, Omar, with, in the East Asian community. I gotta make sure I'm specific now. I actually saw a Tide commercial a while back where it was a couple, they were doing their laundry, and you see a Black guy and an East Asian woman, I'm assuming maybe Chinese or whatever, but he comes to try to kiss her and she pushes him in the washing machine. And then when he comes out, he's, East Asian guy, and then he's able to give his lady a kiss. And it was just the most insulting thing that I've ever seen.
I've seen so many of those.
I just couldn't believe it. I was like,
they're bad.
What? It's like no matter where you go, if you're of a darker complexion, then there's something against you. And the other thing I wanted to point out as well, with regards to the, the violence against the Asian community, you hear about it, but then until you see it actually happen, then, it hits you a little bit different. I mean, just randomly saw a video the other day. There was an incident where a woman this is caught from a store camera. So your perspective is that you're in the store and you're looking outside. She walks by the store and this guy comes up and he literally like karate kicks her in the stomach.
Yep.
She goes down and then he like proceeds to kick her several times while she's on the ground. And then the guy in the store, I guess he was an associate, freaking closes the door and locks it like nothing happened.
Oh, yeah. I just saw
I
that
couldn't
yesterday.
believe it.
I think the guy got arrested too. What's sad and amazing, well, not amazing, but just frustrating about this is that we're attacking a group of people and not attacking the policymakers that are responsible for the spread of COVID, right? So the governor opening up the state. So braggadociously opening up the state. No masks. No, everything's open, and Florida, that place has always been special. so like what I'm saying with spring break, like if you guys haven't kept up, so Florida has had a real influx of spring break people go there because California closed, right? So a lot of people are just going to Florida, and a lot of the residents are unhappy. And it's again back to what you guys mentioned earlier. It's really frustrating just to see the people. I mean, you don't want harm on anyone, but it just kind of shows people how people choose ignorance, right?
Right.
Like a group of people, that's not their fault, right? And it's you not wearing a mask, and you not social distancing, and you not wanting to get vaccine shots, and people not wanting to listen to science. Like those are the people to blame for coronavirus, not Asian people. I did want to talk two more things too, Omar. My family never had to talk either. Now, mind you, my family's like immigrant, so different background. But me growing up, I was called African booty scratcher. Whatever that meant. And also want to talk about what you're saying with the lighter skin tone. So people love like Eurocentric features, like lighter tone you are, like the better off you are. You even see this in our jobs, right? So people who tend to be lighter skinned tend to be, especially if you're a minority, tend to be higher up in the totem pole. So they've done little studies on that as well. So yeah, I mean, that's why we have this podcast, right? To kind of air these kind of
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm the only one. Does that mean I'm the only one in the group here that's had the talk from his parents? That's crazy. I didn't realize that.
I haven't had the talk.
Right.
Well, I'll be honest. I didn't know there was such a thing actually until, I met you guys.
Yeah.
And the time I met you guys is actually around the time I also met my brother-in-law as well, right?
Yeah.
And I also, by extension have, other first cousins and an aunt, that's also African American as well, by the way. Well, obviously their kids are half Pakistani, half African American. But I mean, it's just, I guess being the children of immigrants, our parents, for speaking of, about Sahid and I, they haven't really experienced that and didn't really realize there needs to be a talk.
Yeah.
Whereas Nicholas, I guess with your family, having been here for, multiple generations, it's sadly normalized to the point where that you need to have this talk. But, all minority groups in the US now, all of us, need to address that with our children. It's sad.
Yeah. We mentioned this earlier, right? In another episode, our families benefited from what Nicholas's families had to go through.
Right. Exactly. That's what I wanted to get to. Yes.
Yeah. So the civil rights era opened up a lot of people to come here, a lot of immigrants, Asian immigrants, African immigrants, East Asian immigrants, right? Southeast Asian immigrants, South Asian immigrants, right? So there was a time where that wasn't the case, and we attribute a lot of that to what happened in the civil rights era. So, yeah.
Yeah. You know what I think is going to be interesting, as you were talking about having to have the talk, all of us having to have some version of the talk at some point with our children down the line. It's like how those talks will differ, right? Being that we're all come from different groups. So like when my parents had to talk with me, it basically boiled down to several different points. One was, you're going to have to be twice as good as everyone else to get what everyone else has. And no matter what happens, like the world does not care about you, right? You have to take care of yourself. And if, you know, it boils down to that. You have to look out for yourself. You have your family. But if you get caught up in, you know, any of this mess out here, you know, everything is always going to be worse for you.
Yep.
That's pretty much what it was.
It's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah.
So I had that talk with my parents.
Wow.
And I think it's a almost any first generation immigrant family, they have some version of that talk. It might be colored a little differently, but it is definitely, you know, I remember my parents telling me, look, you are a little different than most of the American kids. You're going to have to prove yourself even more, because they're going to look at you and think you're the son of a janitor, or people that are picking, you know, in the fields. They're going to dismiss you. So you're going to have to stand out in a positive way. And when you mess up, the first thing they're going to say is, oh, it's because you're that kind of person.
Yep.
And so it's funny, because when we were talking about the talk that I was thinking in my head was the talk that everyone's been talking about since last year, which is how to handle yourself when a cop stops you. And I didn't have that talk until mentors had that conversation with me. I didn't have that kind of talk in the workplace about how to conduct yourself in the workplace until I had mentors within the workplace that said, look, they're going to look at you, and the first thing they're going to do is say, oh, you're that hot-headed Latino, so you're going to have to control your temper and not let that get the better of you, because that they'll immediately label you.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And even like, so, you know, like South Asians, we're not really known to be intimidating. All right. Let's just put that out there. We're not. That's just it. Right. Unless we're wearing like a big jacket and we just open it all of a sudden, then that's a little intimidating, but only for a split second. But let me, you know, like back in 2005 or 2006, I was randomly pulled over by a cop who just decided to run my plates. He was sitting in I was at a traffic light, and he was right behind me, and he you know, flashed his lights. I was like, why am I getting pulled over? It pulled me over. And one of the first things he asked me was, mind you, this is about maybe 4 years after 9/11. He literally said, I quote, do you have any bombs? I'm sorry. Do you have any knives, guns, or bombs in your car? I had 2 boxing gloves just sitting in like the back of my car seat. And they asked me prior to that, they asked me for permission to go through my car. I was like, yeah, fine. I don't care. I have nothing to hide. And so they literally went through like the boxing gloves, put their hands inside. It's kind of nasty because I sweat the crap out of inside those gloves, but they were putting their hands inside. They're feeling the foam and everything inside to that degree. You know, so it's sad. Like we've all faced it. And, you know, I think that, you know, everyone's made really good points. And I think for me, I feel I take it very personally when I hear people around me or people attacking my family, you know, for things like, you know, like being related to, you know, an African American, having African Americans in my family, or just saying things about African Americans in general. You know, for obviously, you know, for the reasons that I've already mentioned. And I didn't really want to take this into like a religious perspective, but I'm going to really quick, because we were talking about my background being Pakistan, right? Pakistan is a country that was founded on religious principle, on Islamic principle. And I'm calling out Pakistanis all around the world that are watching this right now, or that watch this in the future, is that we are no better than darker people. All right. The first person in Islam, one of the the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his name was Bilal. And he was the first person to go up and stand on top of the Kaaba and do the call for prayer. And if you see the name Bilal, which you see it a lot, it's because it's to commemorate him. But people forget that. And even in the Quran, and I'm no great Muslim, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to judge anyone based on Islamic principle or religious principle, but I can tell you this, I don't discriminate against people because of their ethnicity or anything, right? I will call something out as I see it, but there is a quote in the Quran, and I'm just going to translate in English, is that no Arab is superior to a non-Arab, and no non-Arab is superior to an Arab. And I just want to end off on that note for my segment, at least, you know, that's something that everyone needs to realize. You know, our generation, you know, you don't really see it in generation Gen Z, for example, but millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, whatever it was before us, and, you know, the boomer generation and all that, right? If any of you guys are watching this,
I think Jose got offended just now. I was like, whatever generation.
No, I had to recircle it back when it goes in order. What is it? Why? We're Y.
You know,
Y,
before
X,
millennials are all just boomers.
I promise that was not meant to be a discriminatory remark.
We were just talking about this.
I'm not offended by it.
So he's about to have a very important call from Jose tomorrow.
Hey.
Hey, so let me actually pick up on something that you mentioned very briefly, Omar, but I think it also buttons up exactly what you just said as I'm, you know, soaking in those quotes you just gave. You talked about before that there's so much more that we all have in common as minorities, people of color. And when we start talking about colorism, we start talking about, you know, we talked about colonialism and how that brought a lot of this thought of being lighter skinned is a part of superiority. And if you go back through history, just even American history, right? The whole point is a power structure. And we talk about racism, right? When they say, oh, well, can someone that's black be racist? Can someone that is of color be racist?
Right.
And there's a concept introduced that, hey, racism has to deal with power. And I think it's a little more nuanced. Is it possible for someone that is black to be racist? I think on a general term, no. But when you start pulling out the different threads and saying, okay, someone, and this is, I think, I had this conversation with some of my brothers the other day, and it got kind of heated. We were talking about, and I don't know how many of you all heard in the news where there was 2 teenagers that carjacked an Uber Eats driver.
Yeah.
And, you know, my foster brother and I, we were like, oh, this is horrible. This is, you know, like, you know, justice needs to be met and we should all be coming together. My foster brother had, you know, some other things that he kind of mentioned that got my youngest brother, it triggered him. He's like, well, no, I need to shut the door. I don't, you know, like, we need to make sure that they're not blaming the fact that these as it 2 girls or I forget, these teenagers.
Yes, 2 girls.
Black.
Yeah.
And I said, look, as insofar as they do it because the person was South Asian, I think that they might not have looked at it that way at the moment.
I agree.
But there was a power play being made there. And so, you know, I told them, you know, my thought was society has taught us to divide and make a distinction. And so we are all people of color. We are all people that are not in power. And those that are in power, they're banking on the fact that we will fight amongst ourselves.
Right.
And keep ourselves divided. Because if we did unite, if we did come together, society would be a lot different. But, you know, it you can go through all the memes, right? A black man walks into a Chinese restaurant or a convenience store. And what happens, right? That's that joke you've seen on Chappelle's show, right? The Asian person following the black person, right? And all that kind of stuff.
Bye.
Exactly. Hurry up and buy, right? You have you know, we were talking about with my brothers, we're talking about Are you going to see a brown child in a cage at the border? Like, yeah, you're going to see that. But are you going to see a white child in New York coming in from Europe? Are they going to be put in a cage? Right? There's a distinction there. And so there's always this different power structures that, people are led into the club, a little bit at a time. It used to be, for example, Italians and Irish were looked down
Right.
upon.
Yeah.
And they were allowed into the club because, oh, wait, there's another group that we can point to say that there's a problem. It used to be that Asians were the model minority, both East Asians and South Asians, right? But the second 9/11 happened, oh, okay, now we have another group to make a distinction on, right? And those parsing and subdividing of these groups to keep ourselves separated is what people, like I said, are banking on so that the status quo persists. So I really love the fact that you said those quotes that you said. I know, bringing religion in, and so to me, I think of it as a philosophical point, right?
Exactly.
If we all came together and did what we felt was right, first of all, those that want to keep the status quo would be very, very concerned because we'd be changing things. We'd be, and maybe this is a good segue into some of the other topics we're going to talk about today, but those are some of the things that I'm excited about because I'm seeing that in like our movies and in our shows, we're starting to talk about these types of topics.
Right. Absolutely. Those are phenomenal points. Thank you so much for saying that, chiming in. And you're right. I think that is see, you look like you have to say something. You're on mute.
Whoops, that was embarrassing. That happened. Yeah, let me say one quick thing. So yeah, Jose, absolutely right. When you talk about us banding together, right, the people in power like get really concerned. You kind of see that happening in Georgia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can't buy people water anymore while they're waiting in lines to vote, right?
Yeah.
So, but go ahead, Omar. Go ahead with your comments so we can like move on to the next.
No, I think that was my final thoughts on that as well. And we obviously on this show talk about all sorts of things, right? Minority empowerment. We're all really the same, and that's really the point of this show. We talk about nerdy stuff, we talk about discrimination, racism stuff, but we talk about more nerdy stuff. Again, we are all the same. We have the same hobbies, right? It's not like we're discriminating against people, like Caucasians, white Americans or anything. It's not that. It's specifically toward the people that do not understand our plight, right? But with that said, speaking of nerdy stuff, getting back into on a lighter note, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yes.
Finally, some good stuff. We talked about DC. It was pretty boring.
Whatever.
Now back to Marvel. Where the real comic book stuff is at.
That is a guy who doesn't read comics and watches giant monster movies.
We're talking about Marvel, all right? We're not talking about DC. You like that?
Did you like that trailer I sent? Did you like that trailer I sent for Godzilla versus Kong? That was great, man.
I gotta say,
I watched that growing up.
I know you did.
Yeah.
But episode 2, so 2 episodes out so far. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, really, really good so far. Having some interesting thoughts about the second episode. And the first one left off on a big.
I have thoughts on these episodes too. So if you thought that we're done talking about race, we're not.
Right. Yeah.
True.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier really does a good job of like talking about race. It does bring this big what the F moment of like, wait, these Avengers guys don't get paid apparently.
Yeah. That was interesting.
Like the one thought I have is like, is Sam still the guy that you can't figure out nobody in your past who can help you fix a boat? Like no one?
I mean, well, my thing was like, is Tony Stark that much of a jerk to not pay any of these people? Like he just has a facility built, like, hey, y'all can stay here, but don't look at me for anything else. Like the billionaire, philanthropist, playboy, blah, 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 but you can't count on me for jack.
It's so funny. So in the Age of Ultron movie, right? There was a little joke about that where Steve, he's Brooklyn, right? So he was like, yeah, I can't afford a place in Brooklyn. I'm like, you can't?
Yeah, but it goes beyond that though, because even like, you know, the guy that, you know, the Falcon, like he was even talking about he doesn't want handouts. He doesn't want that. He, you know, and that was the point that they were trying to make.
Oh,
I don't think a handout is putting your life on the line.
Exactly.
Right? Not exactly a handout, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel that
But who was going to pay them? They weren't employed by Tony Stark. He was one of the Avengers. He wasn't their boss. And okay, yes, he had their headquarters. He kind of was, but he kind of wasn't at the same time though.
Yeah.
Yes, he did provide most of the stuff, but he wasn't their employer, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't
I guess that does bring up an interesting point, because by paying them, that would have meant that they worked for him.
Exactly.
So I think that would have brought out.
So that's how I took it.
Dynamic.
Okay,
but what they should have talked about was okay, Nick Fury recruited them, so he should have employed him and been like, hey,
there you go.
What's the 401k plan look like for a superhero?
Yeah, they're all SHIELD operatives at the end of the day, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point.
SHIELD pension plan.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only part for me that's a little like, like you can't figure out how to get this like boat fix on your own. Like, come on, you know people. But I do want to talk. So what I love about this series and what I loved about you guys particularly is that we don't shy away from race, and this series doesn't do that. I feel like a lot of times people kind of have their guilty pleasures to kind of run away from like race topics, but this one like kind of throws it in your face. And this one hit home for me a little bit too, because it talks about something that we struggle with, especially all of us in the technology industry, right? So episode 1 starts off with Sam giving back essentially the shield, right? Because he doesn't feel like he can do this, right? And you saw this at the end of like Endgame, right? Where it's like it feels like someone else's, right? This touches on a very interesting point that you see a lot in technology. It's called Imposter Syndrome, right? And this is something you see a lot with minorities, women in technology and whatnot, where they kind of feel like there may be a token and whatnot, and they just feel like they're not good enough, right? And so again, you see this a lot in my field, a lot. So Imposter Syndrome is a thing, and yeah, it makes sense that Sam would have imposter syndrome because he is stepping behind a super soldier. And let's face it, Sam got beat up by Ant-Man, so
well, I wouldn't say he got beat up necessarily. I don't know about that.
At the end of that fight, the Cap can't know about this. I'm just saying.
That's because he got away though. Not, I would say he got his ass. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but let's start there. Let's start there. Where Imposter Syndrome, you see Sam giving back the shield. And the episode ended, and boy, I've gone through this actually, where they give the shield to somebody else. And it's just such a slap in the face of Sam. So I will say this, at one company before, I was slated to like take like an elite spot, and not only did they not give me that spot, they hired somebody else and brought someone else to do it. That person who I had to train to do that job, which I thought was mine. So oh God. So yeah, let's stop there. And for episode 1, and let's tell me, what do you guys think about like that so far? What are your thoughts?
So so for episode 1, I really enjoyed it. What got me was the scene at the bank at the end, where like he was trying to get that loan, and it was like, you know, they had all their paperwork in order, everything was good. They're thinking that, hey, everything's going to be good. I can use like a little bit of my celeb status to give my man a little sway, and it didn't mean anything. It didn't mean jack. Right. And the guy was like, you know, no loan, but can I get a picture? Can I get an autograph?
Right.
That's interesting though. Like can the bank like use him as like some celebrity to like for advertising or something? Like it's weird.
Yeah, it's like they didn't think it through at all. But I mean, you know, bringing that back to like you know, how, you know, in real life, like a lot of minority-owned businesses go through the same thing, right? Where they come in, they have a plan. Yes, there may be some risk to it, but had they been, you know, white or whatnot, then the bank probably would have given them that loan. But because they are who they are, the bank doesn't want to take a chance. They end up not being able to start their business, and you know, things snowball from there.
Mm-hmm.
So that just hit home for me right there. I was just like, I could tell then that they're really gonna take it there with this show. Yeah. And I was a little worried because I was like, maybe the premise is just going to be too simple. Like it might be like a Lethal Weapon type deal where you have like two buddies who go on an adventure, and it's going to be super simple. Where WandaVision was like a little more complicated and nuanced. But I'm loving the angle that they're taking.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
Yeah, I have more to say, but definitely Omar, Jose.
Yeah, I've spoken a lot, so I want to give Jose the opportunity to share his thoughts right now.
To me, the scene that stood out in the first episode was the bank scene, and so my take was a little different. It wasn't. I don't know that it was necessarily a well, I guess the way I looked at it wasn't necessarily that he was black, but I think it's all of the history wrapped around that. Where would that family be coming from? What was their background? Like those are the things that banks are supposed to be unbiased. They're supposed to be about the numbers, and they look at that. But then there's always an element of like, okay, do we understand that certain families came from nothing, whereas other families, they started out with a silver spoon in their mouth, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what makes it, like easier for them to have a successful business, like a certain, leader of our country, right? You take someone who, they had their restaurant, because it was like the restaurant, right? If I remember the episode correctly, or the talk, it was she had like a restaurant, and then they had that boat. And so he was talking about, oh, I'm changing the business plan, and now I'm gonna go get fresh catch, bring it to the restaurant, and et cetera, et cetera. So like clearly, like we said earlier, he had a business plan. He was going above and beyond to show that he had viability, he had an idea, and there was no credit given to the amount of grit that his family was showing, keeping the business alive as long as they had. Right. And then say, hey, does that count for something? So that we should be giving that person some grace and some points for the fact that, hey, look, they're already set up to fail, and they're still surviving. And I think that's the story of a lot of those families.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's worth pointing out too that with this pandemic, like 40% of Black-owned businesses have closed down.
Wow.
So yeah, great points by all. Moving on a little bit. So a lot to your points, they talk a little bit about, so some of the quotes that kind of catches me on. So the Flag Smashers, right? That's actually the name of an actual villain, right? But they turn it into a group of people that they have to fight against. And their whole idea is the world is better as one, before the blip or after the blip. So they said that they felt that the world was better before the blip. And Sam...
during the blip.
Yeah, well, during the blip. Yeah, thanks for the correction. Yeah. So, and Sam makes this quote like saying, well, what's better for one, or for what's better for some, is worse than for others, right? Which kind of gives you some of the tone of what this show is about, which is just what I loved about this show. Like they don't hide from the race at all. Like even like even when like he was like referring to like his sister and like how he was gonna go to the bank, and he's like, oh, I'm not gonna play with these white people. I'm like, wait, what? We're doing this?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So yeah, any more thoughts? Because I kind of want to get into that second episode.
Yeah, second episode. Let's do it.
Second episode. So by the way, we haven't talked much about Bucky.
Who's that?
Well, I mean, he gets a little more love here, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he does.
A little bit more in the second episode.
He does.
He's still struggling through his things.
Yeah.
Kind of messed up a little bit. That Cap kind of left him in the future while he went to live his life in the past. I also wonder why he's still not just in Wakanda, just chilling out. But no, it's good that he's like kind of facing like his demons and trying to cope with everything. And you see him with his psychiatrist and and everything. And there's some nuance with the episodes too that like I won't get into because we don't have that much time. But about the second episode, so we get the Captain America, the new Captain America. So
Great.
You're talking about great discount,
Exactly.
Captain America.
It's that typical meme discount, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is what you order, this is what you
Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But you can tell he's a different character because it seemed like he was more likely to solve his problems with brute force than the previous Captain America. Like, did you notice how so Cap didn't carry a gun? Like Steve Rogers didn't carry a gun, but when they were fighting on top of the trucks, or I think it was a truck or whatever, dude turned around his partner was held hostage or whatever, and he came out with the gun, bam, shot the guy. Real quick, you know what I mean? And just the way he was introduced as well, his partner was like, hey, you can't solve all your problems with your fists anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I got a theory about him. He's gonna be either an antagonist or somewhat of an antagonist. He is not gonna stick around in that role. Maybe throughout the season. But a couple things that lead me to believe that is obviously, they introduced him as someone very humane, right? He was being interviewed in the stadium, talked about his past, and they showed him being very humble. But then what did you see after that? Then he was very full of himself. And then they showed him kind of when the Winter Soldier, God, what was his name again?
Bucky.
Bucky, I was about to say, thinking Gary. Bucky and Sam got out of jail, right? He's outside just kind of having fun. Yeah, it's me. I got you out. His humbleness is gone, as if it was all a show. And I wonder how much of his history is even true. So it feels like he's not legit. He's going to turn out to be some kind of an antagonist, or maybe something like someone that's kind of like mixed. But the other kind of funny reason I think that is the actor that they actually picked for him is a little bit, I hate to say this, is they're portraying him as kind of goofyish, right? He's not someone, okay, you look at Black Widow, you look at Sam, you look at Bucky, Captain America, you look at the caliber of these actors. Someone like this is not going to stick around, and be an actual superhero that's going to be part of the Avengers. Yeah. And from what they're already slowly foreshadowing, I think that, they're going to continue to explore the conflicts between Sam and Bucky and him and his buddy.
Well,
I have a theory. Real quick too. Real quick.
He's U.S. agent, by the way. That's his actual U.S. agent. So, but I get the feeling Nicholas is going to touch on this. Go ahead, Nicholas.
So one more thing. So when they were in the fighting scene where when Cap and the new Cap and his partner met up with Falcon and Bucky on top of the truck, and they're like, yo, how did you find us? And he says some BS about being able to track them or whatever. Yeah. Later on, you see a text to the female super soldier. I forget her name, Carly or something like that.
Oh, and
it's you took what was mine. I'm going to kill you. And I'm wondering if it was actually U.S. agent who was able to track her, and he just happened to be there with Cap and Bucky, and he's said some BS oh, we were already tracking you to cover his tracks. I wonder if he was already there. He wants the super soldier serum for himself because he's not a super soldier yet, like the original.
Good point. I think this is all a setup, and I forgot to mention that, and you just took the conversation in that direction.
Yeah. So I have a little different theory on that one. I think there's a different villain that they're going to introduce later, but her name, by the way, is Carly Mongethieu or something, I think. That's the original Black Panther, the actual guy supposed to the group. I do want to talk about what was introduced in episode 2, which was, so they made a great joke when about Black Falcon, right?
Yeah. Black kid.
Did you guys catch
that? Was good.
Black Falcon, Black kid, right?
Are you Black kid?
But they were making fun of. So Marvel was making fun of themselves, though, right? Because they tend to label their characters by their race. So like
Yeah.
Black Goliath was an actual character name, right? So yeah, that was actually a pretty fun joke. But he was on his way to meet Isaiah Bradley.
Yes.
You guys don't know
Yeah.
who this guy is.
One of my
Yep.
favorite parts of the whole episode.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was episode 2. Isaiah Bradley. So Isaiah Bradley, the actual Black version of Captain America, in which they kept secret, right? Who mysteriously disappeared. And I think that actually happened in actual comic book lore. Like, I don't know if like
Yes.
an exact.
Yes.
You guys go ahead and like chat about that. But like I think they actually like got rid of him, like because I guess he
They
just
threw him in jail.
yeah.
Throw him in jail.
Yeah. But I think a lot of like what he did though, what he explained happened to him, is very similar to the Tuskegee experiment. I don't know if you guys know about that one.
That's the point that I wanted to make.
There you
Yes.
go. Yep.
So
What was that?
Yeah.
the Tuskegee experiment. So back like I don't know, God knows when, a while ago, they used men of Tuskegee, right? They tested like syphilis cures on men of Tuskegee, right? So we talk about how the Black community, like with vaccines now, right? The Black community
Hesitant to take the vaccine.
taking the vaccine, and there's good reason for this, right? One of them is the Tuskegee experiment. The other one is the government actually trying to poison people with like.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I know now.
But I'm
So
sure.
the Tuskegee experiment is the one that was publicized, right?
Yes.
But there were so many more experiments
Yes.
on
Henrietta
Black
Lacks.
people and minorities. You know what I mean? Like it's with the medical community learned from about like the female body. A lot of that came from experimentation on Black women as well.
Yeah.
So just the fact that
Wow.
we have a little bit about this in the show about experimentation. I mean, that spoke volumes to me right there.
Yes. Jose, you have anything to say?
Yeah, no, like you guys hit the nail on the head on the part that got me really amped up about this. Like we got to remember this is all happening inside of Disney Plus,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing that got me excited because like Disney Plus doesn't, Disney as a company, they don't like going there because it's a small world and Epcot
Right.
Center and all that stuff.
Right.
They want everyone to go visit that. They don't want to offend anyone, and so they tend to shy away from this. But like this is why I got connected to shows that are based on comics. Dirty Little Secret. I did not really read comics growing up, but because these shows came up, right? Like even like Super Friends and all those things growing up, it made me curious. And now that we have the Google and all these other things, I started researching. So the second that I saw that they had Black Super Soldier, started researching. I'm like, oh, this is this whole, and I found an article that talked about the dirty secret about Marvel and how they had Black superheroes, Black super soldiers, and that in the underpinnings of like Tuskegee and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, this is deep, and it's very poignant that they're actually talking about it on a Disney show. Number one, number two, because of everything that happened last year, the fact that it's like, okay, you know what, we have to have these conversations. I feel it's a small step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so as we bring these things out, and honestly, comics bring up so many subjects that because it was this, I don't want to call it an underworld of like literature, but it's a literature that was able to fly under the radar. So they were able to introduce so many concepts. When you start talking about LGBT, when you start talking about women, superheroes, right? And, superheroes of color, like comic books could go there because there wasn't like this, it wasn't mainstream. And so they could write some of these and do a couple of series, right, about these types of things. And so the fact that they're going there and and that it's coming out in mainstream media, right? Like it gives me a little bit of hope that we're gonna have to start having those conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are some phenomenal points, and I never thought about it that way about Disney, and that's so true. And I think that what's really respectable about what Marvel is doing is growing up. Obviously, a few episodes ago, and actually we touched on this a few times about how the norms of society, what is considered good and bad, change with each generation, right? And growing up, there wasn't really that much awareness about minority rights and equality in the country. So, you know, seeing comic books, everyone was Caucasian, mostly, right? And kids grew up aspiring to want to be superheroes, like most guys, right? Not always guys, girls too, but mostly guys, right? And that's, I think it's great that they've now realized, maybe not now because they've been doing this for some years. I mean, look at, you know, Luke Cage, you know, and you know, the Daredevil, you know, that whole, you know, series that they were doing, which for me is, I felt like when Marvel really started exploring, you know, like minority equality and stuff like that within the, you know, their movies and shows. But I think it's just really, really respectable that they're doing this, because now kids today can look up to minority superheroes and be like, I want to be like that one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you guys catch on to that? I mean, that scene had so much that I was just like, oh, I'm giddy. Did you catch when Baltimore PD shows up?
Yes.
And they go to
how can we
Bucky.
not mention that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir, are you okay?
This man bothering me.
And then who do they end up arresting?
Right.
Yeah.
Bucky gets arrested.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring that up and I completely forgot. So Jose, thank you for mentioning that. I mean, that speaks for itself. And they picked Baltimore of all places.
Yeah.
It was.
And notice how the cop put his hand on his gun when Sam was talking back to him. He was like, I'm not giving you anything.
Yeah.
And the dude had his hand on his gun like real quick.
Yeah.
And notice how Sam, all of a sudden, they almost like, I don't want to say change his character, but it was almost like they were literally now focusing on showing something else, like literally trying to prove a point.
Well,
you know,
they're focused on him being black and that, like, him being a
exactly,
hero. You would
because
think
he
that
could have
Sam would be-
easily have said, "I'm the Falcon."
Yeah,
but
well, I mean,
obviously
he- again, he helped save like the universe, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
saved you all.
You think that he'd be known for that, right? Forgot to
Well,
mention.
they even said, "I didn't recognize you without the suit or something."
Goggles or
That's what they
something.
got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
BS.
Yeah.
So one real quick thing about what you guys said about like now kids see like superheroes and they're like, oh, that could be me.
Mhm.
So I have a 7-year-old. This kid is obsessed with Black Panther. Like he goes to bed with his little Black Panther action figure because he sees himself in that. He sees himself in that character. He really saw himself in Miles Morales. Like,
Nice.
Great character.
I'm so, they could have the most crappiest Spider-Verse movie out there, and I will still take my son to watch that because he sees himself in that superhero.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That animated Spider-Verse movie is a classic, man. I love that.
that's probably
Still waiting for that male South Asian superhero that's not, you know, some IT expert. We have Kamala Harris, who's Miss Marvel.
Miss
Actually, also, you know, also Pakistani background, from Jersey. Same last name as my wife. So.
And you also have, I think his name is like Simon Val or something like that, but he's a Green Lantern in DC too.
Mhm.
By the way, I said Kamala Harris, and I just realized that it's not Kamala Harris.
Her name is Kamala Khan.
Kamala Khan.
Actually, no.
Did I really say Kamala Harris?
I think you had it right. So Kamala, our vice president, that's how you pronounce her name. But Kamala Khan is the right way to pronounce it.
Yeah.
So I think you had it right.
Okay.
I did want to point out a couple of things. I think the bad guy is going to be called Power Broker. That's the person who I think is who's getting those texts from like Carrie. So Power Broker is like one of the bad guys in Marvel. So Isaiah Bradley's nephew there, the one that didn't want to let them inside the house, he's also a hero, right? So he's
Eli Bradley.
Eli Bradley, yes. So he's Patriot. So we don't know if he's actually going to be in one of these, like, they are trying to do this young superhero type thing.
Young Avengers.
Yeah, the Young Avengers. I think he was in something else called the Thunderbolts, I think. I'm not sure. But
So I'd never heard of Power Broker. What is he? Some like evil life insurance agent?
might as well be. No, I think Power Broker.
It's Jake from State Farm's boss.
Looking him up right now.
Yeah, no Power
Partnership
Broker-
with Red Skull. Okay.
Yeah, he's a thing. That's a thing. He's a guy. So, yeah, there's some things to actually look out for
Interesting.
for that
I
guy.
really think they're going to do the Young Avengers thing though, because you have the Kamala Khan series, you have Eli Bradley, you have Hawkeye's daughter.
Yes.
I forget her name or whatever, but she
Hailey
becomes
Steinfeld. Hailey Steinfeld.
Yeah.
Hailey Steinfeld. She's beautiful, by the way. But go ahead.
You're too old.
Whatever.
They have a couple other people too.
Ouch.
I forgot like the whole thing. Yeah, I think Young Avengers is coming, man.
Nice. Yeah, I think we should save that for another episode because I don't know much about Young Avengers. I think that would be a really interesting topic actually to get into.